Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Lily Makes Stuff. I am super excited to show you how to make the getaway dress. Super comfy, super warm, and super easy to make. Another really cool thing about this dress is that it is completely customizable. It does not follow the standard crochet patterns like for a size small, you do this many stitches, you do this many rows. This is all based on your individual measurement. So these are the materials that I used. I used approximately 6 skeins of Peyton's Alpaca Blend. This is a bulky weight yarn, and it calls for a 6mm hook, and there are 155 yards. And like I said, I used 6 skeins of this, and this color is called Blueprint. And then I used 4 skeins of the gray called Slate. And for this pattern, it's really critical that you have measuring tape so that you can measure yourself and know how to make the dress, like what size to make it. Tapestry needle, stitch markers, scissors. I used a 6.5mm hook for the large part of the skirt and the top. And then for the middle section, I used a 6mm and a 5.5mm hook. You do not have to use 3 different sizes of hooks. You can just use one size hook. And depending on what type of yarn you use, obviously you're going to possibly use different size hooks. But you can still use, like if you needed a 7, you could use a 6.5 and a 6. What size hook you use is going to be based on whatever yarn that you used. And since this is completely customizable, I can't tell you for sure how many skeins of yarn you're going to need because it's completely based on your specific yarn and your specific sizes. The dress is made up of 4 pieces: the front, the back, and then the 2 identical sleeves. So to make the front, you're going to need to know the front and the back. You're going to need to know these measurements. For the front, you're going to need to know measurement A, which is the widest part of your hips, down to the length you want the dress to be. And measurement B is from the widest part of your hips to right underneath your boobs. So that's the same for both the front and the back. To do the back, you do measurement C, which is from underneath the boobs to the top of the shoulders. And then for the front, when you get to this section right here, you only go from underneath the boobs to where you want the neck opening to be, which is measurement D. And then for the sleeves, they're made exactly the same way, 2 of them. You're going to take the circumference, the width around your wrist, and then the length from your wrist to the top of your shoulder. That's how long you're going to make your sleeve. And then you're going to need to know the circumference of your upper arm, which is like here. Plus, I did plus 3 inches so that the sleeve would not be completely fitted, but at the same time not be too large. I wanted to explain a little bit further the 3 different hooks. So this was the widest part of my hip right here, and so from here down, I used the largest hook, the 6.5. From here to here, from the widest part of my hips to underneath my boobs, I used the 2 smaller ones. First the 6mm and then the 5.5mm hook. As you can tell, it just made a very gradual hourglass shape. From here, all of the gray, I used a 6.5mm. So it basically tapers in to underneath the boobs and then goes larger. Also, after I got done with the dress, I did not include this in the instructional video. I did 2 rows of single crochet around the neck. It just seemed to finish it off a little bit better. That's something you don't have to do, but it is an option. Also, there will be a free written pattern on my website, lilymakesstuff.com. Okay, let's get started. Okay, to begin with, we are going to make the back section. The back and the front are made pretty much the same way. except the back is just a very large rectangle. The front is going to have a neck hole in it. But they're both the same width. And they're just, like I said, large rectangles. And we're going to be using the moss or the linen stitch, and I will show you how to do that. So the first critical thing is making sure you have done your measurement A, which is the widest part of your hips. And you're going to take half of that, and that is how long both the front and the back widths are going to be. Okay, so for me, I was 38 inches around, and so half of that would be 19 inches. So my front and back widths are 19 inches. Okay, so we're going to chain an even number of stitches, no matter what width you want. It needs to be an even number. And I'm only going to show you a swatch here. So I'm going to chain 12, and I want to show you how the size of your chain changes as you work 2 or 3 rows. By the 3rd row, it should stay pretty consistent as far as the length. Okay, one more. Okay, so on the 1st row, we're going to, just for measurement sakes, I want you to measure minus those last 4. Okay, so minus those last 4, it's 3 inches. Okay, these 4 are going to be our turning chains. So to work the moss stitch, you're going to do a single crochet into the 4th chain from your hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You do a single crochet, chain 1. You skip the chain below and go into the next one with another single crochet, chain 1. Again, skip the next chain below and work a single crochet into the next one, and do this all the way across. When you get to the end, it's the same thing. You just do a single crochet. And then to begin the next row, chain 2 and turn. And then we're going to be working into the spaces right here. You can kind of see pretty obviously that there are spaces. So instead of normally working into the V's on the top of rows, we're going to work into the space we created by skipping. Okay, so after your chain 2, you're going to single crochet into the 1st space, chain 1, and skip this single crochet that we made and work into this next space, chain 1, work into the next space, a single crochet, chain 1, skip the single crochet and work into the space, chain 1, and then you're going to work 1 single crochet into this last chain 1 space. Okay, and then you're going to chain 2 and repeat. Work a single crochet into the 1st space. I know this dark yarn, it's kind of hard to see, but it might be easier to feel, honestly, than to see. Single crochet, chain 1, skip, single crochet again, and you're going to repeat this row till you get the length that you want. And the way that you know the length that you want is where you measure the widest part of your hips down to where you want the length of your dress to be. So if you wanted it from your hips to your knees, you know, it's going to be a shorter length, like 15 inches. If you want all the way to your ankle, it's going to be longer. So I wanted to show you, this is my 3rd row, and we're at 3 inches. Okay, so that's how you can determine how many chains to do. So chain until you want the length you want, do 4 more, and then you begin the moss stitch. Okay, So like I said, you're going to repeat this row back and forth until you get the length that you want. And then I will come back and show you how to do the next section. And this section we did with our 6.5 millimeter, and the next section we're going to switch hooks. Okay. Okay, now we're going to start the middle section, or section B, and this is where you will have taken measurement B. This is from the widest part of your hips to right underneath your boobs. You can see I have just finished my from the widest part of my hips down to the length I wanted it. Mine is really long, so I've got quite a bit of material here. So you're going to need to make sure that you count the number of rows that it took you to reach this measurement, because you're going to do the very same thing for the front. Okay. And so this next section, you get to choose how you want to do it. If you want it to just be a big giant rectangle, just keep using the same 6.5 millimeter hook, or whatever hook it is that you're using for your yarn. You don't have to switch hooks. The middle section, if you want it to be more tapered in like an hourglass, you have the option of using 2 different size hooks. So I started with a 6.5, and then from, let's say this was like where my boobs are, from this half, I'm going to use just one size, half size smaller, so a 6.5 millimeters. And then halfway to my boobs, I'm going to switch and go to an even smaller hook, 5.5 millimeters, ½ inch smaller. So that way the middle section will kind of pull in. And then when we go from underneath the boobs to our shoulders, I switch back to my bigger hook. So it's kind of up to you how you want to create the shape. You can also just do, like if you started this section with 6.5, you can just go to one size smaller, 5.5. It'll really draw it in faster. Or just do a half size. This middle section, do the whole thing in a 6 millimeter hook. So what I have chosen to do is my next section, from the widest part to my hips, section B, to underneath my boobs, is like 7 inches. So for 4 inches, I'm going down a half size, the 6.5 millimeter, and then the last 3 inches, I'm going to go down one more half size to the 5.5 millimeter. But you continue to do the same moss pattern that you've been working across here. Nothing changes as far as the number of stitches across. You just switch hooks and it makes it a little bit smaller. So I will meet you back when we get done with this middle B section. Okay, I just got to the top of section B, which is, this is going to be right under your boobs. I feel like I'm saying boobs a lot in this video. It's kind of funny. I don't know else how to describe it, so boobs it is. So you can see how it very gradually tapers in. The nice thing about just using different size hooks is that it's not real dramatic. Instead of increasing or decreasing, it's a little bit less dramatic than that. So I'm going to show you how to connect a new color if you want the top section, section C, to be a different color. So I didn't quite finish this stitch, because this is how you will join. So this would have been the last single crochet right here. And instead of yarning over and pulling through, I'm going to stop those 2 loops there, and then I'm going to get my new color and leave a little bit of a tail, because you will need to weave that in, and you're going to pull it through just like you were starting a new row. And then I do a slip, just a single crochet, and then you need to just anchor it, just pull it really tight. Okay, and then you're going to just start like you do every other row, chain 2 and turn, and work your first row. And I also switched back to my 6.5 millimeter, so it will kind of, when you finish this row, it should look a little bit bigger than the last row. Okay, so you're going to work your way across. So we just added this new yarn. So your old yarn cut about the same length as this one. Okay, so I just cut the old yarn, and I like to do a little knot just to make sure that they don't come unraveled, or you can just weave them in without doing the knot, but I do a little knot and then weave these in at the end, okay? And then you're going to keep working across. Okay, so I wanted to show you again that using the different size hooks, down here we used the 6.5, here I used the 6, here I used the 5.5. It's not a dramatic change. And then here I went back to the 6.5. So it's real subtle. So the way you know how many rows to work for section C, which is going to be from under your boobs to the top of your shoulder, is you're going to measure and go to that length. Okay, and I would, when you think you have reached the length that you want, I would wait to cut your yarn until you have done the front, to make sure you don't need to tear any out or even add more to the top. Okay, so up to this section C, the front and the back are made exactly the same. The back is just going to be one large rectangle. So you will do as many rows as you need to reach measurement C
for the back.
And I would definitely make sure that you use stitch markers to help keep track of how many rows you do on the back, so that your front and your back are going to match. You can keep track and do the same thing for the front. So up until section C, which is right under your boobs, you are going to do exactly the same
For the front and the back.
So Barbie and I are going to recap at this point. You should have completed the complete back section, the back panel, which is A, B, and C. It should be just a very large rectangle. And now we're going to start on the front, which you just repeat section A, repeat section B, and then we're going to do something different from underneath the boobs to where you want your neck opening to begin, that measurement. Okay, so the way you know how many rows to do of this next section is you're going to take measurement D, which is under your boobs, to where you want your neck opening to be, and then you'll stop, and I will show you how to do the neck opening. And by this point, you should have completed the back section completely. Okay, so for me, my under the boobs to top of the shoulder was 13 inches. And so my measurement D came to right here, which was 7 inches. And I went ahead and used this back section to mark where that is, to help me know how many rows to make on the front. And then once you get to measurement D, where we're going to stop, then I will show you how to do the neck opening. So I just finished working on the front side from under the boobs to where you want your neck opening to be, which is measurement D. So for me, it was 7 inches, and that's right where I'm at. And so now we're going to work on the neck openings. Okay, so you're going to take your back section again, and you're going to use the back section to help figure out where you're going to come to. So you're going to start on both edges and work your way in to counting the single crochets. Okay, not the stitches along the top, but equal number from the outside in of the single crochets. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I put my stitch marker in the top of the 8th single crochet. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on this side. So approximately this is going to be 7 inches, and that should be plenty opening to get your head in there. Okay, so I don't know how many, everybody's stitch is going to be different, but you want to come in using the single crochets, equal number. Okay, and so that's what we're going to do on this front section, and you're going to start it just like you would you have been this whole time. Going to chain 2 and turn, put in your first single crochet, second single crochet, third, fourth, until you get to the 8th one. You're going to repeat this little section until you have reached measurement C. So from under the boobs to the top of the shoulder, just like you did on the back section. So by the time you get done with this section, you should have the same number of rows as you do in the back. Sorry. So starting from here and counting to here, however many rows you have there is what you're going to have starting from here till you get to the top of this first shoulder section. And then I will show you how to do the other side. Okay, so I just finished my first neck opening. So I'm just going to repeat a little bit. So from here to here for me was 7 inches. So this total length, I can't get it all in the picture here. The total length from under the boobs to top of the shoulder for me was 13 inches. So that would leave another 5 inches that I would need to complete. So I just did that. And you are going to leave an extra long tail. So that you can use this to connect the back with. Okay. And then fasten off. All right. And to start the other shoulder opening, you're not going to start on the end. You're going to start in the middle and join your yarn. Okay. So whatever number of single crochets you did here, count that number of single crochets from the edge, put a stitch marker, and then that's where you start your neck opening. Okay, so you're going to put your hook through, grab some yarn, do an anchoring stitch, just make it really tight. So that anchoring stitch isn't going to count as part of your pattern. So you're going to chain 2 and single crochet into this next space. Chain 1, single crochet into the next space, same as you've been doing. And I am incorporating this tail so I don't have to weave it in later as I go along. When you get to the end, you do the very same thing you have been doing. You just put a single crochet into that last chain 2 space, chain 2, and turn, and work your pattern just like you've been doing. And then you're going to do the same number of rows on this side, obviously, that you did on this other side so that they match. Okay, so I just finished sewing the other shoulder and my sides do match. I have equal number of rows on both sides. And before I cut and fasten off, I am going to double check myself, and I would suggest you do the same thing, that the back section from under the boobs to top of the shoulder matches the front. Okay, so from this edge right here down to here, make sure that you have the same number of rows. Okay, so if that all looks good, go ahead and give yourself extra length. I usually triple what size I need for the yarn. Okay, and we will fasten off that, and then I will also fasten off this side, and this side I don't need to leave a really long length because we did on the other side. So just long enough to be able to weave that in. And that's what we will do next. We will, my yarn will cooperate. Okay, so you're gonna lay the front section over the back section. And when you're laying the front section over the back section, you want both the right sides together, which there's not really a strong right side or wrong side with this pattern, but I have my little strings right here, and basically they're going to be opposite. Like the front I'm going to have on the right, and on the back they're going to be on the left. Okay, there is a little bit of difference you can tell right here along this seam from the wrong side and the right side. So I am just wanting to make sure that the right sides get together. Okay. And then we're going to work one side and then the other, weaving the edges together. So you will need your tapestry needle. And I have stitch markers where this should be joining up. So I've got my yarn and tapestry needle, and I am going to go into where my stitch marker is, from the inside to the outside, and then do the same thing on the other side, inside to outside, working my way along the edge. Like you're tying a shoe or shoelaces. And you want it to be tight, but not so tight that it bunches. Okay? Okay, so I just finished weaving along the edge. You can see how nicely that came together. And so now you're just going to weave this end back through. And I have quite a tail left over, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. Just going to go back and forth. And then I will cut this one and then weave this one in. Okay, and now you're going to do the other side. I'm going to weave this one in at the end. And it's basically the same thing. Okay, the same thing. You are going to just weave from the inside out, inside, out, just like you were lacing a shoe. And going to do the same thing on the other side. Weave in your end and then cut it. As we begin the sleeve, you're going to want to have determined some more measurements, and that's going to be all the way around your wrist, the circumference of your wrist, and all the way around your upper arm, plus 3 inches, and then the length of your arms, so that would be from the top of your shoulder down to your wrist. Next, we're going to do the sleeves. I've already done one, just wanted to give you an overview. The ribbing is done out of slip stitch in the back loop only, and then we continued the moss, and I increased every 8th row. I'll show you how to do that. And as you can see, it's not a real dramatic wedge. It's kind of more subtle because I didn't want the sleeve really baggy, but you can choose to increase more frequently and it will create a bigger sleeve. Okay, so to begin the ribbing, you're going to do a slip knot, and then you're going to chain 11. And then from the second loop from your hook, you do a slip stitch, and you keep doing the slip stitch all the way across. When you get to the end, you're going to chain 1, turn, and work in the back loop only. So as you can see, there's our V, and you're going to work in this back loop a slip stitch. And slip stitch ribbing can get really tight really fast, so don't be afraid to make your stitches really loose and big. And you are just going to continue this until you have the width that you want, the width of your wrist. And however wide it is, you need to make sure that you have an even number of rows of this ribbing. Okay, so for me, it was 40 rows. This last stitch tends to hide, so if you want to put in a stitch marker, it might help you find it easier. And it's really easy to drop or add stitches using slip stitch, so you should get in the habit of every row making sure you have 10 or use stitch markers. Okay, now that you have finished your even number of rows of ribbing, also with slip stitch ribbing, each one of these little rows right here represents 2 rows actually. So you can make it easy to count by just counting by 2s. So this would be 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, so now you're going to do 1 chain, and you're going to work a single crochet all along the top. So you, at the end, you should have 40 single crochets. Okay, you should have the same number of single crochets across the top as you do rows, and that should be an even number. And now we will just start the moss pattern, which we have been doing. So you will chain 2, turn, and skip this next stitch and work a single crochet into the next one, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet, chain 1, skip, single crochet, and work that all the way across. Okay, you're going to repeat this moss pattern that we've been doing, which is chaining 2, working a single crochet into the spaces below, chain 1, skip the single crochet into the space, chain 1, single crochet into the space. You should be pretty familiar with the moss stitch at this point. So the next thing that you have to decide is how many rows you're going to increase. The more rows you increase, the wider the sleeve will be. I suppose if you had a really skinny arm, you wouldn't have to do any increases. I chose to do every 8th row. So mine is not particularly wide, but I increased every 8th row until I got the width that I needed for my upper arm circumference. And then I stopped increasing. Okay, so this will be, you know, a very individual thing, just like the rest of the pattern. And when I get to my 8th row, I will show you how I did my increases. Okay, I just finished my 7th row, so I'm starting on the 8th, and this will be an increasing row. You're going to chain 2 like you normally do, and in that first space, you're going to do the same thing, single crochet, but instead of moving on to the next space, you're going to just add another chain 1 single crochet. So chain 1 and put another single crochet in that first space, and then chain 1 and then continue on the same way we've been doing, regular pattern till you get to the end. Okay, coming to the end, chain 1, single crochet into that last space, but instead of stopping there and chaining 2 and going to the next row, do another chain 1 and single crochet into that last hole. And you are definitely going to want to use stitch markers to keep track of which is your 8th row. You can do it at the end, do it at the beginning, help you keep track of the 8th row. Okay, so you are going to, so when you get to the end of your increasing row, you just continue like normal, chain 2, turn, and then you have to find the space. It's a little bit harder after the increase row to find that chain 1 space, but you single crochet into that space, chain 1, and just work the same pattern like you have done. And at the end of the row, it might be a little, again, difficult to find that chain 1 space in between the 2 single crochets where you increased, but you just keep the same pattern, chain 1, actually it's right here, okay, single crochet, chain 1, and then into that final chain 2 space, a single crochet. Okay, so you're just going to want to repeat your pattern however many rows you do before your increase. Just keep doing that and keep doing your pattern until you get to the width that you want for your upper arm. and then you can stop increasing. So here was my last increasing row, and then I just kept the same number of stitches all the way till I got the correct length. So the way that I figured out the length was from my wrist, kind of right where I wear my watch, up to the top of my shoulder. So when I got to 18.5 inches, I stopped. So I've just finished my second sleeve, and I just finished the second sleeve, and just a repeat. This width was the circumference all the way around my wrist. Okay, and for me that was 40 rows. Whatever width you do, you want to make sure you have an even number of slip stitch ribbing. And then the first row was just single crochets, the same number of rows. So these were 40 slip stitches ribbing, and so I had 40 stitches single crochets. And then I decided to increase every 8th row, and that's what I did until I reached the width that I wanted, which was my upper arm circumference, which was 13 inches, and then I added 3 more inches so that it wouldn't be too tight. So this was my last increasing row, and because I had reached the width I wanted, and then just continued. So now it is time to fasten off, and I'm going to leave long yarn so that I can use this to attach it to the dress. All right, so to know where to put your sleeve on the dress, I folded it in half and marked middle. Okay, and then I'm going to bring my dress over, and we've already done the sleeves, the shoulders. You will need your tapestry needle. And we're basically going to do the same thing that we did right here when we joined the shoulders, when we join the sleeve. I'm going to line up my middle with the seam of the shoulders. So I'm going to secure my sleeve to the dress with stitch markers while we weave them in. Okay, so I've got my sleeve secured with my stitch markers, and now we're just going to weave together these edges like we did on the shoulders. And you go from the inside out like you were lacing up your shoe. And you don't want to pull too tight. Or make it too loose. I'll show you, I've already done the other side. I'll show you what that looks like. So here's the other shoulder. And you can see it makes a nice seam. Okay, next we're going to sew up the sides. Okay, now we're going to sew up the sides, and you want to cut a really long piece of yarn. Like I said earlier, whatever the length is, I try to triple it for my yarn for the seamings. And you want to line up the edges. You can fold it in half like this, but since we're using a mattress stitch, to me it's a little bit easier to line up the edges this way. So I know you can't quite see all this well enough, but I have what I determined as the right side on the inside. And so this is the wrong side, is on the outside. Okay, and we are going to go to the underarm. So we'll seam up here, get to the underarm, turn the corner, and continue to seam up the side until we get to the blue. And then when we get to the blue, we'll have to switch to blue yarn to seam up from under the boobs down to however far down you want to seam. You might want to leave a slit in the leg, but okay. So same technique that we have used before with the mattress stitch. You're going to start from the inside and go to the outside. And this is going to be very tedious because of how long we had to make this yarn. This was from when we did the ribbing, and we'll have to fit that in. I like to make a knot. Just to make it be a little more secure. And we'll have to weave that in. So, just like before, inside to out from one side and then the other. So I will not force you to watch me go all along the seam, but I will meet you back here to where the blue starts. Okay, I'm coming to the end here of our gray section. Just have a few more stitches to weave in. Okay, and when you get to the end of your gray, you're going to secure it. I kind of like making a knot. Just makes me feel better. Well, there we go. Okay, and then you're going to take your little tail and weave it back in. Just going to go back and forth on itself a couple of times. Okay, and then cut off the tail. So you're going to do the very same thing. You're going to get a long piece of blue thread and start weaving in down the sides of this blue section. Okay, when you get to the end, you'll fasten it off, and then you're going to weave in all these little extra ends, and then you are done. Please remember to subscribe for any future videos, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy your dress.